Okay, so we're live. So welcome everyone to the Irish American Heritage Museum, to our second event in our Collars, Canals and Conflagration Series, which is partly funded by the Hudson River Valley Conservation Group. I don't think I got that name right, but their logo is on the poster. We're delighted, to have our in-person audience, and of course to have Toss the Feathers back with us, who have played at our galas and various other events for years here in the museum. So tonight is really a musical history lesson. We're going to talk about the immigrant experience in the capital region and beyond, hitting the high and low lights like working on the canal and the Civil War, factory work and all that. So it's a perfect event for this series that we're doing as part of the Hudson Valley Heritage Network area is what it is, because we talk in that about collars and canals and conflagrations. So they're going to cover it all tonight for us. So thank you to our audience. Thank you to Toss the Feathers, and take it away.
Our story starts in 65 years after the Mayflower came ashore. Dublin, and he was noted as colony then, only perhaps a settlement of about 100 people. Nonetheless, the Dutch had already laid the beginnings of the foundation of significant enterprise between Americans and Experience. They were growing building barrels and moving all that down the Hudson River to Philadelphia and New York and the other settlements, as well as across the ocean. The Dutch surrendered to the was appointed and among the other accomplishments during the first quarter in all a record which went into the 20th century. Albany was already emerging as an important commercial center in the colonies. Wide open work opportunity. The word got back to Atlantic. Opportunity to work hard, to save money, to buy land, which you could not do in Ireland. So Irish people kept coming. In 1797, there were enough Irish Catholics. They incorporated the first Roman Catholic Church, called it St. Peter's Church. It was only the second Roman Catholic Church in all of New York. By 1830, they had to tear down the first and rebuild a much larger one. Irish people that they tore down the second building and built what we know as St. Mary's Church on Lodge Street. Emigrated Irish people Quebec and the way up to Albany. As they his home, to Canada, a taste of that dilemma of a risky journey across the ocean in a way but you believe opportunity. adorns the birthplace of beauty and home of the brave. When I think on those valleys with fond admiration, I thought never again her green hills I might see. But my thoughts they shall wander to thoughts of dear Ireland when we reach the green fields of America. 'Tis hard to be forced from the life that we live in. Our houses and lands no pledge for to sell. To wander alone among Indians and strangers, to seek a safe place for our children to dwell. Our farmers, our artists, our tradesmen are going to seek for employment far over the seas, where they shall gather riches by trade and industry. There's nothing but hardship at home if you stay. There's brandy in Quebec, Halittans and Secord boys. There's gin in New Brunswick, a penny a glass. There's ale in that famed town they call her Montreal, boys. The devil be with us if we don't take a glass. So fill up your glasses, you lads and gay lasses. There's gold for the winning and lots of it too. Success to the heart that is courage to wander. Misfortune to him or to her that should rule. Our ship, she is lying in Verderi Harbor, just waiting to take us straight over the main. So heavens be our pilot and send us strong breezes when we reach the green fields of America. Come to the land where we shall be happy. Don't be afraid of the storms or the seas, for when we get over, we will surely discover that this is the land of sweet liberty. Well, by 1800, the newly independent United States of America was growing rapidly. And the Appalachian Range, which runs from Maine to Georgia, was dividing the western expansion from the eastern commercial cities. Crossing it was slow and dangerous and expensive. You couldn't put more than 250 pounds on a pack animal. The Hudson and Mohawk rivers provide the only natural opening through the Appalachian Range. And in 1817, Governor DeWitt Clinton and the legislature appropriated $7 million to create a canal that would link Buffalo and Lake Erie and the Midwest Commercial Center to Albany and the Hudson River and down there to the Atlantic and Europe. The canal was dug by hand and horsepower, and the Irish who were already in Albany sent word home that there was this extraordinary work opportunity. About 3,000 Irish people came and dug the canal,
and it opened in 1825. And coincidentally, today, October 26th, is the anniversary of the opening of the canal in 1825. The canal was an immediate success. It reduced the cost and time of transport by 90%. And it made Albany and Troy sit at the junction of an extraordinary amount of commerce that went from the Midwest to New York City and to Europe and back. The Irish laborers who worked along the canal settled along there too, and especially in North Albany, Waterville, and Cohoes.
There are a lot of folk songs that remember the canal, the construction of the canal, life on the canal, and even the mules that would walk alongside the canal pulling the barges. I've got a mule, her name is Sal, 15 miles on the Erie Canal. They don't write them like that anymore. The song that we'll sing next is perhaps the best known of those folk songs. It's Paddy on the Canal. It's and we'll be hearing a lot more from this Paddy fellow throughout the evening. He certainly seemed to get around. How is the volume? Is it louder, softer? Ready?
In sweet Philadelphia, the weather was pleasant and clear, but I did not stay long in that city, so straightway I shall let you hear.
No, I did not stay long in that city, for it happened to be in the fall, and I ne'er reefed a sail in my rigging till I anchored out on the canal.
When I came to this wonderful empire, it filled me with greatest surprise. Oh, to see such a fine undertaking, where the like ne'er opened my eyes.
For to see a full 1,000 brave fellows that work among mountains so tall, and a digging in valleys so level, through the rock for to cut the canal. And it's fare you well, father and mother, and likewise to old Ireland too. And it's fare you well, sister and brother, so kindly I'll bid you adieu.
Well, I settled with them for the season, my monthly pay for to draw, and being of a very good humor, I often sang errand goodbye.
Our provisions, they were very plenty. To complain, we'd no reason at all. I had money in every pocket while a-working out on the canal.
And at night, when we rest from our labors, being sure that our rent was all paid, we'd lay down a pick and a shovel, likewise our axe and our spade.
Then we all sat a-joking together. There was nothing our minds to enthrall. Oh, if happiness be in this wide world, I'm sure it is on the canal. And it's fare you well, father and mother, and likewise to old Ireland too. And fare you well, sister and brother, so kindly I'll bid you adieu.
Elizabeth,
Go back 4.
Oh, back up.
go back
2, 3.
Oh,
one.
yeah, there you go. Thank you.
So the flute I'm going to be playing in the next set was made around 1810 in Albany by a fellow named John Meacham, who had a workshop on Lodge Street. And it's a one-key, simple system Baroque flute. And flutes like this would have been fairly common for dance musicians back in those days, because it's relatively inexpensive compared to a lot of the other instruments you could get at that time. And also for Irish traditional music, plays easily in keys of D and G, and which is usually what the tunes are in. So Meacham's business really prospered over the years. He moved from the little workshop on Lodge Street to kind of the bottom part of State Street, and as the workshop grew and the business really prospered, moved through, I think, 4 different addresses on State Street, slowly going up the hill, and ended up at 82 State Street, which is where the IBM building is right now. Henry David Thoreau actually played a flute very similar to this. It was a Meacham flute, made probably in the 1820s, mid-1820s, something like that. And Stephen Foster played a flute made by Sylvanus Pond to steady Meacham's workshop. And Meacham was actually the first native-born musical instrument maker in the United States, it turns out. An Albany person. So I'm going to play. We're going to play a couple of jigs. The first one is called the Hibernian Dance, and it was published in 1811 by a fellow named Glaubner in Boston. And after that, we'll play another jig called The Land of Sweet Erin, which is also from one of the Glaubner collections called Country Dances and Cotillions. So these are folk music from, or dance music from the Irish tradition about the time the flute was made. Jigs.
Well, not long after the Erie Canal was open for business, they began work on the next big project that would eventually take a lot of that business away. That was the construction of the railroads. And of course, that wasn't just in this area, but it began, well, actually the first railroad built in New York State was in this area, and it was one of the earliest railroads in the country. That was the Mohawk Hudson. Construction began in 1830. It just connected Schenectady to Albany. And back then, those were the kinds of sections you had, because it's a lot of work building a railroad. And then later they had another section going to Saratoga. And of course, over the 19th century, it kept going and going until eventually they crisscrossed the country. So there was huge business in the 19th century, and there was plenty of work to be found working on the railroads. But it was also very dangerous work. There's a lot of deaths from industrial accidents, from exposure to the elements and diseases like diphtheria and cholera. So it was very dangerous work, and so much so that there was this grim saying from that part of the 19th century that under every railroad tie, an Irishman lay buried. But they got it done, and by the later 19th century, we connected the country coast to coast. Now this song is from later in the 19th century when railroads had been built, but they had to be maintained. And what we see here is a section crew. They were responsible for a designated section of the rail. They would travel on a hand car like the one shown here, hand powered. There was like a seesaw that you would work to make it go, which was a lot of work. And so it was important that it stay lubricated. Hence the title of this next song, Jerry, Go Oil the Car. So they would travel their section of rail and look for places where it was sagging or uneven, and they would jack it up and fill below with ballast to make it safe again, to make the railroad safe. We don't know a lot about the author of this song, but we know he came from Ireland, from Connacht. He wrote the song around 1881, and although we don't know the songwriter's full name, his nickname was Riley the Bum. So this is Jerry, Go Oil the Car. Jerry, tune my instruments while you're at it. Come all you railroad section hands, I hope you will draw near, and likewise pay attention to these few lines you'll hear. Concerning one Larry Sullivan, alas, he is no more. He came some 40 years ago from the green old Irish shore. And for 34 weary years he worked upon the track. The truth they say from the very first day, he never had a wreck. For he made it a point to keep up the lower joints with the force of a tamping bar. He'd say joint ahead and center back, and Jerry, go oil the car. See old Larry in the winter time when the hills were clad with snow. It was his pride, the handcar to ride, as over the section he'd go. With his soldier's coat buttoned up to his throat, sure he looked like an emperor. And as the boys shimmied up the ties, he'd say, Jerry, go oil the car. And one Sunday morning came around to the section hands, he'd say, I suppose you know that my wife goes to Sunday Mass today. I want every man to pump all he can, the distance it is far. I want to get us in ahead of number 10, so Jerry, go oil the car. And with all my friends gathered round, one last request I crave. When I am dead and at my rest, ride the handcar past my grave. Let the spike maul rest upon my chest with the gauge and the old claw bar. And as the boys lower me down, have Jerry go oil the car. and give my regards to the roadmaster, poor Larry did cry, and lift me up that I might see the handcar before I die. He was so weak he could barely speak, in a moment he was dead. Joint ahead and center back was the very last words he said. I have read that in those days, working for the railroad wasn't just a job, it was really a calling. It's because there's so much safety and so many lives at stake. And that song certainly seems to reinforce that perception.
In 1830, Albany was 8% Irish. By 1845, Albany was 40% Irish. And by 1870, which was the peak year of Irish emigration, Albany was 50% Irish. The Irish were unique among the European migrants who came here in that many more women than men, Irish women than men, came, and they came alone. They had somewhat greater autonomy than other European women did, and the poverty in Ireland made marriage at home less likely for them. So they came. Meanwhile, as we talked about, Albany and Troy were the junction of burgeoning commerce in the developing country, and there was a growing middle class. They could afford servants, and Irish women were the preferred servants because they spoke English, they were very hardworking, and they were single. They were collectively referred to as the Bridgets or the Biddies, the nickname of Bridget. They worked 12 to 14 hours a day and had just one half day off a week. Nonetheless, they were paid enough that they could send money back home to Ireland. And those remittances among so many young Irish domestic workers added up to considerable sums that were still supporting families back in Ireland. And a great number of Irish people that came into this area were from Limerick, both men and women. And they settled to agree, in concentration in North Albany, which became known as the Limerick neighborhood, or just Limerick. And it is the neighborhood that William Kennedy grew up in, the author. So for the domestic work of all the Bridgets, we're going to play a pair of slipjigs, Dusty Miller, which comes from the Ryan collection of 1840, and Biddy from Limerick, which comes from Francis O'Neill's collection. And I think, especially in Biddy from Limerick, the second tune, I just hear a woman going up and down endless flights of stairs. So in the early part of the 1800s, wooden cargo ships were leaving North America, headed towards England, loaded with timber, grains, produce, furs. They often found limited ballast on the return trip, which was an issue for them. Meanwhile, in Ireland, in West Ireland, especially, tenant farmers were dividing small plots of land, smaller and smaller and smaller, among their many children, until only potatoes could produce enough value to actually feed families and pay rents, until 1845, when the global potato blight wiped out potato crops everywhere. And the Irish were starving. Over 1 million Irish people emigrated to the United States and Canada, while many more than that died at home. And suddenly those wooden ships that had never been designed to carry people found paying ballast and inhuman cargo. The Irish were sick and malnourished as they crowded into ship holds that were not designed to hold them, with meager food and water for a journey that could last anywhere from 3 to 7 weeks, depending on the weather. Contagious disease swept through the holds, and many people died in what came to be known as coffin ships. The Jenny Johnson was a square-rigged bark built in 1848 in Quebec and designed to carry timber to Europe. On her maiden voyage, 1848, she docked in Tralee, County Kerry, on her way home, looking for provisions and supplies, and was pressed to take migrants, something her owner had never intended to do. But faced with the desperate need, he decided he would do his very best by these people. And so he put sleeping pallets in the hold and really brought on enough food to keep everyone well nourished. And he hired a physician to travel with the migrants to ensure that they were well. They arrived in Quebec recording 1 live birth, some illness, but no deaths. You can go to the next slide too. And in all, the Jenny made 16 round trips from Quebec to Europe, and then coming back into the ports of sometimes Baltimore and Boston, as well as Quebec. And in all of those round trips, no one ever died, not once. She eventually foundered in 1858, carrying a load of timber, but the crew was rescued and no one ever died. And for that, she attained mythic status among the Irish. And so the original plans were discovered. And in the year 2000, a replica was built of the Jenny. And in 2003, she sailed to Quebec and then the US ports, celebrating with the descendants of the immigrants that she had carried. And the first time we did the song that I'm about to sing, someone came up, an older man, and he was wearing his Jenny Johnson memorial hat. This was up in the Adirondacks in Wells, and he lived up there, but he was a descendant of the Jenny's people. She is now docked on the Liffey River in Dublin, where she serves as a museum of the Irish diaspora and immigration. So we're going to sing a song called Exile's Return, written by John Doyle, a contemporary Irish singer-songwriter. But you hear that the stretching of saying goodbye, which will be a forever trip. And the Jenny is mentioned in the song. She prowls under the moon. Snow lies thickly on the ground, and though we bid farewell in sorrow, we may meet again in distant lands, and drink our health in joyful parting. When the exile shall return again, the hearth is hard to leave this long night. We face a long and treacherous road, but hard times must be faced undaunted. Loved ones lighted up our load, and though we bid farewell in sorrow, we may meet again in distant lands, and drink our health in joyful parting. When the exile shall return again, the distant corn of Knocknarby stands, bare and bleached o'er Queen Mary's tomb. O'Hara's castle stands undaunted, waiting for her lands to bloom. And though we bid farewell in sorrow, we may meet again in distant lands, and drink our health in joyful parting. When the exile shall return again, the night is cold, the children are sleeping, restful dreams of Tiernan know. The Jenny Johnson's bound for sailing. Now, my friends, it's time to go. And though we bid farewell in sorrow, we may meet again in distant lands, and drink our health in joyful parting. When the exile shall return again, when the exile shall return again.
Irish Americans played an enormous role in the American Civil War. An estimated 150,000 Irish-born soldiers served in the Union Army. And many others served in other capacities in the industries that supported the war effort. Around here, just upriver in Troy, we had the Burden Iron Works. Actually, could you? And the Burden Iron Works produced, among other things, some of those massive plates for that earliest armored war. The ironworks also produced most of the horseshoes used by the Union Army, as they had what at the time was new technology for rapidly mass-producing horseshoes. So that's an advantage the North had over the South. And the ironworks employed a lot of Irish workers. There was a big Troy Irish population. And across the river in the Waterville Arsenal, they too employed a lot of Irishmen. And they, of course, were very busy during the Civil War, at times producing over 32,000 bullets a day for the Union Army. Just a sort of a sober reminder of the size of that conflict. Now, forward. And of all those soldiers who served, many of the Irishmen had volunteered. They were certainly recruited. This is a recruiting poster from New York City. You probably can't read it, but it says, "Up with the green flag, the red, white, and blue. In striking for Columbia, we strike for Erin too." So trying to get some cross-cultural patriotism going there. And a lot of Irishmen did volunteer because, of course, America was their new adopted country. And they wanted the Union to survive and saw the Civil War as a threat. Later in the Civil War, many were drafted. The draft was enacted, conscription. And when it was enacted, there was a provision that allowed you, if you had enough money, you could buy your way out. You could pay someone to serve in your place. And that, of course, did not do the poor working classes any good at all. And so that was not well received. And there were big anti-draft riots in New York City and in Troy. So yes, there were countless Irish who served in the army, but they had different paths that led them there, and presumably different perceptions and attitudes about that conflict. So that brings us to the next song. It's about a man who leaves Ireland for America, hoping for a better life and finding when he gets here that, well, welcome to America, you're in the army now, Paddy. The song is sometimes called Paddy's Lamentation, or it also goes by the name By the Hush. Oh, it's by the hush, me boys, sure that's to hold your noise, and listen to poor Paddy's sad narration. For I was in hunger pressed, and in poverty distressed, that I had a thought to leave the Irish nation. So I sold me horse and plough, my little pigs and sow, my little bit of land I soon departed. And my sweetheart bid McGee, now I never more shall see, for I left her that morning broken-hearted. Here's you boys, now take my advice, to America I'd have yous not be coming. For there's nothing here but war, where the murdering cannons roar. I wish I was back in dear old Dublin. Myself and 100 more to America sailed o'er. Our fortunes to be making, we was thinking. But when we landed in Yankee land, they shoved a rifle in me hand, saying, Paddy, you must go and fight for Lincoln. General Maher to us said, you get shot or lose your head, every murdered soul of you will get a pension. Well, in the war I lost me leg, they gave me a wooden peg. I tell you 'tis the truth to you I mention. Here's you boys, now take my advice, to America I'd have yous not be coming. For there's nothing here but war, where the murdering cannons roar. Wish I was back in dear old Dublin. Now I think myself in luck to be fed on Indian buck in old Ireland, the country I delight in. And with the devil I do say, curse America, for I'm sure I've had enough of their hard fighting. Here's you boys, now take my advice, to America I'd have yous not be coming. For there's nothing here but war, where the murdering cannons roar. Wish I was back in dear old Dublin. Thank you.
Child labor was rampant and unregulated all over America well into the early 20th century. It's really under Roosevelt and Francis Perkins that it was addressed. And poor immigrant children worked alongside adults in mines and factories, in textile and grain mills, garment factories, and laundries. The Vaudeville arsenal, which made Civil War ammunitions, employed 2,000 people, and 25% of them were boys and girls, children. My own maternal grandparents were born in Philadelphia in the 1890s 2 Irish immigrants, and they left school after the 8th grade to go work in factories to help support their families. My grandmother did exactly that job. She was a mender in a woolen mill. So whenever the thread would break, she would go in with her child-sized fingers and tie imperceptible knots that would not spoil the woolen goods. That was the job. And my grandfather worked as a felter for the Stetson Hat Company from 13 on. We are going to sing a song called School Days Over by Ewan McCall, and we offer it for all the children who had to leave childhood far too soon to go to work and support their families. School days over, come on now, child. Time to be getting your big boots on. Pull on your cotton buckskin trousers. Time you be on your way. Time you be earning the big man's job, earning the big man's pay. Come on now, Jim, it's time to go. Time you were working down below. Time you were holding the pick and shovel. Time you were on your way. Time you were earning the miner's job, earning the miner's pay. Come on now, die. It's almost light. Time to get down to the anthracite. The morning mist is on the valley. Time you were on your way. Time you were earning the collier's job, earning the collier's pay. School days over, come on now, child. Time to be getting your big boots on. Pull on your coat and buckskin trousers. Time you were on your way. Time you were earning the cleaner's job, earning the miner's pay. School days over.
After this one.
After this one.
Will I keep going?
Okay.
Nope, but that's too far.
Go back to the lady.
That's the brief. Yes. Okay. So before there were washing machines and dryers and permanent pressed fabrics, women washed clothes by hand on scrub boards in hot water with lye soap that cracked their hands. And it was grueling work. They hung them out in the freezing cold and they brought them back in and ironed them with flat irons that had been heated on stoves. Unless you had a Bridget who was doing that for you. It's what the Bridgets did. But in 1827, there was a young Irish woman in Troy named Hannah Montague, who did not have a Bridget, but she did have a fastidious husband who wanted to look fresh and his best at every moment and was changing his shirts as often as 3 times a day, leaving Hannah with this enormous pile of laundry that she was doing by hand. In exasperation, she cut the collars off of his shirts and told him to wear that same shirt for 3 days in a row while she would provide him with freshly laundered collars. This changed more than her life. Her invention caught hold and launched the industry that gives Troy its name, the Collar City. Factories sprang up. Women stitched detachable collars by hand as laundries washed, pressed, and starched them and sent them back out. By 1845, they had also invented the detachable cuff. And in 1852, steam-powered sewing machines were on the factory floors, greatly increasing production. The Troy women became so skilled at this whole operation from beginning to end that other cities could not compete. One woman could produce 40 to 80 dozen collars a day, or 30 to 40 dozen cuffs. And the annual revenue from this operation was at $5 million and up. The women were working 14-hour days on factory floors, crowded together, and paid as little of that revenue as the owners could manage to dole out while still retaining their skills. By 1860, the collar industry in Troy employed 3,700 women, and most of them were Irish. And by the 1920s, when this industry peaked, there were 15,000 women working in Troy in the collar industry. We are going to play for all of these women who washed and ironed and pressed, the Rakes of Kildare and the Irish Washerwoman, 2 Irish jigs recorded by the Flanagan brothers in 1923.
Indeed, right?
That's what I was hoping you were checking on too, yes. Yes, okay.
Well, thank you. We're more than halfway done and we're going to take a break now. I'm going to attempt to tune this instrument and you can stretch your legs or do whatever you need to do. We'll be back in about, what, 10 minutes?
Yeah. So Facebook people, there's time for you guys to go and, you know, make tea or do whatever you need to. We'll be the same here and we'll start back up the live stream in about, 10 minutes. So don't go too far away. Thank you.
And when we get back,